All right, roof warranties. Um, Solar projects can void the roof warranty, as could just getting up on the rooftop and walking around on it. Rooftops are not meant to be construction sites, and that is a lesson that can be learned over and over and over again if you do a lot of construction sites on the rooftop until you start paying a little more attention to what you're doing your work on top of. Now, I think solar has many advantages to earn its place on the rooftop. Putting a metal framework that's strong and lightweight on top of a roof only gives it more structural integrity. So if the house is burning down, the roof will stay up longer. So I think that firemen should actually like solar on the roof rather than, and I know it's not the firemen, but the fire code and solar, they're arguing for the same real estate. Beyond structural integrity and perhaps some mild insulative properties, a solar array on the roof should extend the life of the roof. The number one cause of rooftop deterioration is that direct exposure to sunlight, which is unavoidable. So getting up on the roof and walking around on it, yeah, that's bad for the shingles. That grit falling off should not be happening. But the grit will fall off with just direct exposure to sunlight and exposure to the elements. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that walking around on the shingles is better than the shingles just being exposed to sunlight. Walking around on the shingles is worse. You're not supposed to walk around on shingles. But if installed in a proper manner, the exposure to sunlight is what degrades the shingle. So covering it up with solar should extend the life of that roof surface. And installers know that the lag screw into the rafter underneath is such a strong connection that it's a leak from a solar roof attachment is like the last thing on an installer's mind in terms of things that could possibly go wrong with a solar array. It just doesn't happen. There's many stories of installers saying I can count, 10 to 1 whenever there's a roof leak that it's not the solar array causing the leak. And in my experience, that's true. It doesn't mean that the contractor didn't cause the leak, but the solar attachments didn't cause the leak. Maybe the contractor didn't seal the roof penetration correctly. Maybe the contractor was walking around a little too close to the edges of the buildings and stepped on some flashing and busted some sealant and didn't realize it. Or maybe something else with the roof has gone wrong, but the leak being caused by the solar attachment being screwed through the roof, that is not the prime suspect when there's a roof leak, even after the solar array is installed. And so there's a there's a rare reason where the solar array installed correctly would ever trigger a roof warranty issue. For the most part, the solar array would be protecting the roof once installed correctly. Of course, a solar contractor, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, can install solar without voiding a roof warranty. Solar is a product that is rated and listed and tested to be on a rooftop. There are proper roofing products, flashing shingles for this. And there might be a competitive edge that a roofing manufacturer would have over an electrical contractor, and that they could, promote the fact that they're already, fine with, maintaining the contractor warranty of the roof and the manufacturer's warranty of the roof. But most roofers do not do solar, and most electricians do not do solar. The problem with putting solar on an old roof is not that it wouldn't help get longer life out of the old roof. I mean, I hate the argument that says the roof is old, let's rip it off and put a new one on before we put the solar array on, because both will last a really long time. You know, the solar array should extend the life of the roof, whether it's brand new or whether it's 10 years new or 15 years new. So what is the real problem with the ages being out of sync, or whatever that really means? The problem is getting up on an old roof. The old roof has already experienced its deterioration rate. And so an old roof is simply, older than a new roof, and a roof does not make a good construction site. So when solar can be hard on a roof, and some installations are harder on a rooftop than others. It's all about access, walkability, the ability to get your roof equipment lit in, the amount of weight and material that's up on the rooftop. All those things impact the job site. And the simple fact is, an old roof is easier to damage. So a roof that's old enough to really start showing the signs of age from the ground, that's a rooftop you could get up on and start walking on the shingles, and the shingles are ripping and sliding out, and now you have a much larger problem on your hands that you might not be accounting for as just the solar contractor. You might be thinking, hey, I'm doing him a favor by putting something protective on top of his terrible rooftop, not accounting for the fact that it could be an older roof, that the problem is when you're up on it working. So I'm not really concerned about the age of the roof versus the age of the solar array getting out of sync. I mean, solar is a long-term product. If it were my own personal home, I'd probably do rolled shingle underneath the array, because we're going in with the mindset that we're doing shingle replacements whenever we're doing array replacements. I don't know. Just keep in mind that older roofs are easier to damage when working on them. New roofs can be problematic as well, like a commercial spray-on roof. It needs to be installed correctly. If they're spraying it on and it rains and they keep spraying it on, then that spray-on coating can just peel right off. I guess that's more appropriate for a roofing class. Certainly good to learn some roofing vocabulary. Some states, you might have to take a residential contractor's exam to get licensed. For example, if the state doesn't regulate their residential electricians, then there's no electrical exam. You need to take the residential exam. And so roofing questions and carpentry questions are on the standard residential contractor exam. We got the bottom cord. Where's my laser pointer? There we go. We got the bottom cord of the truss. We got these nail plates, these metal things on the sides that give it some reinforcement. I've been calling these purlins. They're also called battens. Now, these battens are not on all roofs. The battens go up, when you're like putting a metal sheet roof on top of rafters, battens will go in between. So you'll deal with attachment points that run, across the rooftop rather than up the rooftop, depending on whether it's a shingle roof or a metal roof or a tile roof, depending on whether you have battens or not. That could determine whether or not your solar panels are portrait or landscape. Batten roofs are a little bit more complicated to get the spacing right. Rafters with a portrait landscape are considered the most cost effective, quickest design. Although I think there's benefits to doing landscape too. It looks better. It sometimes can fit more modules on the rooftop. I like portrait orientation. I like the economy of it. It is faster. So we got the bottom cord, we got the top cord, nail plates. The fascia is another good term. It's that piece of wood that runs along the side of the house. Sometimes you'll need to screw into it for securing your ladder to the wall. Well, let's see. We got the internal support beams called the webs. Let's see, the nominal span being the span between the load-bearing walls. Looking at this foundation, footers, posts, girders that go along the side of the posts with joists that go on top of it. I was thrown into a solar pergola project where there weren't any designs. I didn't sell the thing. And it was a mess because none of us really knew the vocabulary of a girder versus a joist, and there were no plans and no instructions. And so when we were just imagining what a pergola was going to look like, some of us were thinking girders, others were thinking joists, and that wasn't a very good day in terms of communication. So knowing general construction certainly helps. All right, we got a video. That's fun. Let's see what this is. Oh, all right.
My name is James Adams, structural engineer.
So this is a video on Solar Roof Check. They are a engineering company as a service. And if you want to kind of go a step above what is typically found in a residential sales process, you can include structural engineering evaluation. It's really not a bad idea to do on every job. Some local jurisdictions require it. And so I just wanted to show you, what, this is just his survey form, but what items you would put in to get an engineering analysis done and kind of what goes into that process. So they're putting in their name, snow load. Down south, it's 10 pounds a square foot. Up in Minnesota, it might be 50 pounds a square foot. Wind speed varies greatly whether or not you're on the coast or inland. The main thing with wind speed is there's the wind speed and then there's the 3-second wind burst speed, which is faster than the wind speed. So you have to pay close attention to whether it's asking for wind speed or wind burst speed. How much of the roof does the solar array cover? How deep are the lag screws? What's the roof type? What's the span of the bottom cord? Now, your system weight you get from your racking design software when you input your array layout and modules and microinverters. It's about 3 pounds per square foot for a residential type system. So here they're putting in the spacing between standoffs and whether or not the standoffs are staggered. So here they're selecting what kind of structural wall goes into it, and based off the structural wall, we're putting in, all right, are the rafters 2x8s? What's the slope of the roof? What's the mean height of the roof? You know, the type of decking, the roof slope, and then the exposure category, whether or not it's in a low exposure or a high wind, high exposure zone. And so those are the items that would be needed for a site evaluation. And if you need a structural engineering stamp, you run through these calculations and the engineer stamps it for you. Or what they're providing here is just kind of an engineered report rather than an actual stamp. And there in building code there are structural load calculations, and let's just go through these real quick so we know what they are. There's different case loads for maximum load on the roof. So we see the roof uh, being uplifted on the standoff with half of the weight of the solar array considered as combination one. So what's the maximum uplift force on the array? Then wind can also be a downward force. They're saying what's the dead load of the roof? What's the dead load of solar? What's the dead load of the roof plus the dead load of solar plus wind when it's down? Add in snow to the dead load calculation. Add in a combination where there's snow and there's wind. Um, and then seismic load combination calculation for risk factor, and then uplift load for the roof and for solar. So in building code, you can find these calculations, but that's he's putting his name on it as a structural engineer, even though it's not a stamped document. For relatively cheap, and that would allow you to say, okay, we've done our due diligence on the roof structure. So sometimes you will be asked to submit an engineering compliance report, and they're looking for these different load count combinations to make sure that they have been competently calculated. Let's talk about different roof types. We talked about shingle roofs and metal roofs. There are Spanish tile roofs that you have to take completely apart in order to expose your attachment points. This is a built up rooftop. They're putting some insulative covers on top of it. If commercial flat roofs are commonly covered in EPDM, PVC, or TPO. As far as what is the best coating for solar, so far I like TPO the best. I like EPDM. Really, it's a little harder to seal, and PVC to me is a little too weak to be walking around on. TPO seems nice and rugged. Is has a great sealing method for the penetrations, and looks to be relatively the same in terms of PVC for puncture seals. So, I like my preference is towards TPO. It's just different thicknesses. EPGM comes in a different kinds of thicknesses. My problem with the PVC roof was on a very thin coating PVC. There might be better ones out there.